Picture this. You get home after a regular day, you turn on the news, and the first thing you hear isn't that the war is over. It's that Iran is declaring victory. Not as internal propaganda, not as rhetoric for domestic consumption. Iran's Supreme National Security Council says it publicly, to its own people. Nearly all the objectives of the war have been achieved. And at the exact same moment, in Washington, Donald Trump calls the very same agreement a total and complete victory for the United States. Both sides, two victories, one deal. Today I'm going to reconstruct, point by point, what's actually inside the 10-point plan Iran put on the table, and more importantly, why Trump called it a workable basis for negotiation, just hours after threatening to destroy an entire civilization. I've studied geopolitical negotiations for years, and what I found inside this agreement has no real precedent in recent Middle Eastern history. This isn't a nuclear deal. It isn't a temporary ceasefire. What's on the table, if it gets formalized, is what a historian at the University of St. Andrews already described as a comprehensive restructuring of the regional order in Iran's favor. Here is the central argument you're going to hear today. The real winner of this agreement doesn't appear in any headline, and understanding who that is, and why they stayed in the shadows, is going to change how you read everything that comes next. Let's start with the conflict itself. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated military operations against Iran. The stated objective? Eliminate its nuclear program and dismantle its regional capabilities. Within days, Iran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally flows. Crude prices spiked, financial markets went into panic mode, and Donald Trump, who had arrived at the White House promising economic prosperity, suddenly found himself facing a domestic fuel crisis that was eating into his political base. Here's the first layer almost nobody is looking at. Trump didn't back down for military reasons. He backed down for domestic economic ones. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz was the most effective lever Iran has had in decades. Now, the 10 points. Point 1. The Strait of Hormuz reopens, but not for free. Iran's plan proposes that every ship transiting the strait pays $2 million, split between Iran and Oman. Iran retains operational sovereignty over the most strategically important waterway on the planet. Point 2. A formal non-aggression commitment from the United States. This is unprecedented. No previous agreement between Washington and Tehran has ever included this kind of explicit guarantee. Point 3. Withdrawal of U.S. military forces from the region. Not from Iraq specifically, not from Qatar specifically, from the region. If formalized, this would represent the largest American military drawdown in the Middle East since 2003. Point 4. The lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions against Iran. The United States has imposed sanctions on Iran in various forms since 1987. Removing all of them would be one of the most profound shifts in American foreign policy in 4 decades. Point 5. Acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment program. And here is where things get genuinely strange. The Persian language version of the plan, the one shared with Iranian media outlets, explicitly includes the phrase acceptance of enrichment. The English language version, the one circulated to international press, does not. Same plan, 2 versions, 2 languages, 1 strategic omission. Point 6. A ceasefire in Lebanon and an end to Israeli strikes. Netanyahu has already stated this point doesn't apply to Israel, which makes this one an active fault line inside the agreement itself. Point 7. The release of frozen Iranian assets. Iran has billions of dollars locked in international financial systems. Unfreezing them would be an immediate capital injection into an economy that has been devastated. Point 8. War reparations from the United States. It's in the Persian version. It's absent from the English one. Same pattern as point 5. And this time, the numbers aren't abstract. Human rights organizations have documented more than 3,500 deaths since the conflict began, including at least 244 children. Point 9. a binding UN Security Council resolution to formalize the agreement. Iran doesn't want an informal understanding between two presidents. It wants international legal architecture that makes this irreversible. Point 10. Recognition of Iran's role in regional security. Not as a threat, as a legitimate actor. Analysts at Chatham House have noted that, taken together, this plan surpasses the 2015 nuclear deal in almost every dimension. That agreement was a nuclear for sanctions relief deal in which Iran accepted strict enrichment limits and intrusive inspections in exchange for partial, reversible sanctions relief. What's on the table now, in the words of one Iran historian, is not a nuclear deal. It is a comprehensive restructuring of the regional order. Let me translate this into something concrete. If you're a European company that wanted to do business with Iran and couldn't because of sanctions, this agreement opens a market of 85 million people that has been closed for decades. If you're an oil importer in Asia, the reopening of the strait brings crude prices down within weeks. If you're an Iranian citizen who's been paying inflated prices for basic goods because the banking system was blocked, this means access to foreign currency, normal imports, the ability to breathe. Now the question no analyst is answering clearly. Why did Trump accept this? Option 1. Trump is calculating he can negotiate better terms over the next 2 weeks, and this is just a starting point. The problem with that option is that Iran already has the strait reopening in exchange for that promise. The economic pressure that existed before has already been relieved. Option 2. Domestic pressure in the United States became unsustainable. Fuel prices, market volatility, congressional criticism. Trump needed an exit and he took it. Option 3. There's something that isn't on the public table, a parallel agreement, a private understanding we haven't seen yet. All 3 options are possible. None of them are comfortable. Scenario 1. Negotiations in Islamabad advance, and within 2 weeks there's a formal agreement. The regional order changes. Iran emerges as a recognized power. Israel finds itself in a position of diplomatic isolation it hasn't experienced since the 1980s. Scenario 2. Negotiations collapse. The points on enrichment and reparations deadlock everything. Conflict resumes, with one key difference. Now Iran has the narrative that it was the United States that broke the deal. Scenario 3. A partial agreement gets reached. The ceasefire holds. Some sanctions are lifted. Enrichment is left in deliberate legal ambiguity, exactly like the JCPOA of 2015, exactly like the agreement Trump himself destroyed in 2018. Scenario 4. An external actor intervenes. Israel launches an independent operation. The fragile equilibrium breaks, exhales sharply. Everything resets to zero, but in a context where American military credibility has already been questioned. Now let me speak directly to whoever is watching this and feels like something in this story doesn't quite add up. You're right, there are 2 versions of the same plan, one in Persian, one in English. The differences aren't translation issues, they're substantive. Uranium enrichment, war reparations. 2 points that completely change what Iran is agreeing to and what the United States is conceding. Both sides are constructing a victory narrative for their domestic audiences. Trump needs to call this a total victory. Iran needs to show it resisted and won. Both can be right within their own story, and both can be lying at the same time. What we can say with certainty is this: the world that existed before February 28th no longer exists. The Strait of Hormuz proved it can paralyze the global economy. Iran proved it survives. And someone with no flag in this conflict is already counting their gains. Let's recap what we know. Iran presented 10 points. Trump called them a workable basis. There's a 2-week ceasefire. Negotiations begin in Islamabad on Friday. There are documented discrepancies between the Persian and English versions of the plan. Israel is not included in the Lebanon ceasefire. And nobody yet knows what parallel agreement exists, if one does. History doesn't get written in official press releases. It gets written in the versions that don't match across languages. So I'll leave you with one question. If this agreement is a total and complete victory for the United States, as Trump says, then why is Iran celebrating in the streets of Tehran?